Welcome to another episode of Discog Discourse. On this episode, we're going to be ranking and reviewing every We Came as Romans album. My name is Nathan. With me, as always, is my good friend Jeff. And making his triumphant return to the Thunderdome, we got Kyle back. Kyle, welcome back. We missed you on the last one. How are you doing, man?
I missed you guys. The level of FOMO I had listening to the last one, I almost couldn't finish it because I just felt like I missed out so greatly. And I love Silent Planet, so having to miss out on Garrett also really sucked. So
it was the twist of the night.
Yeah, it really was. I got to be more committed.
I don't know about that. There's not much you can do when work just drops something on you and takes over like that. But
it's fair.
We're glad to have you here today.
This needs to be my primary source of work. Jeff, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I got my 10-page essay on We Came as Romans, so we're ready.
Oh,
his
notes.
I got my notes in my back pocket, and I'm ready to go. I'm excited. This should be a good high-energy app.
Yeah. So before the episode, we were talking, and it dawned on me that we've never really talked about this on the podcast before, but we always ask our guests about it. What is your experience with this band?
Yeah, I mean, my only experience with We Came as Romans was listening to Cold Like War when it came out back in 2017. Admittedly, I didn't really like it that much, so I didn't really listen to them after that. To be honest, I feel bad I didn't give them their due, so I'm happy to come back and actually listen to their entire discography because there's some pretty good music here, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I kind of felt bad that Cold Like War was my first experience with them, although my opinion on that album has changed drastically, or at least it changed a little bit. So we'll get there.
A little teaser.
Teaser for you guys. Yeah.
Kyle, what about you?
I experience truly with We Came as Romans. I mean, I've heard a handful of their songs and know generally their history, but it really started about a month ago when we decided we were going to do We Came as Romans. So I'm very fresh to them. I know that's kind of heresy to say for a band as enormous and influential to the mid 2010s metalcore, hopecore scene. So I am late to the party. That's on me.
Okay, that's okay. My experience goes back a long ways with We Came as Romans. I've been listening to them for quite a while. I heard their albums a long time ago. I remember actually seeing them. They co-headlined with Memphis Mayfire. It was something like the Man vs. Food tour was the whole branding behind it. And that was when we were in high school. And I think I'd heard of them before that, but never really dug too deep into them. But I remember seeing them at that show, really enjoying it, and then kind of getting into them after that. So there have been songs on my library for a very long time, but I'm excited because I got the opportunity to kind of freshen up on a lot of their newer stuff, which I haven't really listened to quite as much. And I definitely have some thoughts on it. So
sure.
We'll get into that. So yeah, I think this is going to be a fun one. But as always, before we get into this any further, do got to plug the socials. If you want to join the discourse, you can follow us on Twitter at Discog_pod, on TikTok at Discog Discourse, on Instagram at Discog.Discourse. And also, we have a Patreon now for anyone who may want to support the show. You'll get bonus episodes like the one we're going to record right after this, where we determine the consensus top 10 We Came as Roman songs. All three of us are going to have to come to an agreement and finalize our top 10. You'll also be able to vote on what bands we cover on future episodes that we don't have guests on, like the one that's actually coming up next month. And as you'll hear later, our second tier donors can actually read off their rankings on the show. Also, if you could be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening on, or if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, comment, all of that, that would help us out a lot. The algorithm eats that up. And as always, we have some shout outs that we want to get into here. If you want to shout out, all you got to do is quote our rankings and give us your takes. And these, of course, are from the last episode we did with Garrett from Silent Planet, where we ranked and reviewed every Under Oath album. So if you haven't heard that, go check it out. It was a good one. This first shout out comes from French Revolution Sword at Diamond Dave. His list is as follows. It goes number 1, Define the Great Line. 2, They're Only Chasing Safety. 3, Disambiguation. Lost in the Sound of Separation. Erase Me. Voyeurist. The Changing of Times. 2 and 4 are interchangeable, but I'll always remember seeing the Writing on the Walls music video before Define the Great Line came out and feeling something shift in me. So high on the list of life-changing musical moments. Now, Kyle, obviously you weren't present for that episode, so I do kind of want to toss it over to you right now and kind of get a temperature check from you on these shout-outs that we have here today.
I have no real problem with this ranking. Under Oath has an extremely strong discography. I am interested that Lost in the Sound of Separation is at number 4 because I have that as being one of the more interesting albums that I got to listen to from them, and I love it. I love that record. I think they did such a good job with their experimental stuff while still staying true, and the production, the vocals, both cleans and heavy, are damn near perfect in that record. So that kind of surprises me. But I mean, again, at the end of the day, They're Only Chasing Safety being at number 2. I can sign off on that. That's also a fantastic record.
Yeah, no, that is an excellent record. I feel like that's kind of the consensus 1 and 2 if you were to like get a feel for the whole fan base.
Right. Yep. I understand why The Changing of Times is so low on pretty much everybody's list. I think it's a stronger first album than a lot of people give it credit for, but the production is pretty tough to listen to. So I do understand it in that regard.
There's some great songwriting on there.
So good, dude. The song structures are fascinating that they use.
They are. Yeah, no, they're really good. And I just said, if you get a temperature check on the whole fan base, they probably put They're Only Chasing Safety number 2. But not this next shout out. This next one's from Lauren at Lauren Denise. She says, we've evolved past the need for putting Chasing Safety in the top 3, and I'm so serious. I don't even know what to say about that. That album's just so good. It was so influential. It was so big for them. Obviously, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's cool. That's, you do you. But I mean, I feel like that was just such a huge album for them in the scene. And it's, for me, quite easy to see why.
I agree.
This last one is from Corey Bernazzoli at Old Head Bernie. He says, an absolute must-listen episode of Discog Pod. And that is just extremely nice. I'm glad you liked it. He actually goes on to say, this is my favorite episode of the pod so far. Under Oath is my favorite band of all time, and I've been waiting for this list since the inception of this show. This discussion was insightful, fun, and brought me to tears. Love you guys. And then he also goes on to say, but here's my tier list for Under Oath. 7, Erase Me. 6, The Changing of Times. 5, Voyeurist. Chasing Safety. Define the Great Line. Disambiguation. Lost in the Sound at number 1. To me, there isn't one bad Under Oath album. Erase Me was and is a good rock album, but easily the worst Under Oath LP. I think it's good. I think it's fine. I think it's good.
I think it's bad.
I think it's got some good songs, but as an album, it doesn't. I don't think it holds a flag.
I'm never going to go back to it.
I mean, you look at their run from 03 to 09. Unbelievable. From They're Only Chasing Safety to Disambiguation.
Oh yeah,
it is as good of a run as we've seen.
Yeah, that's like peak Under Oath for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, like, post hiatus Under Oath doesn't really hold a candle to much of that, but I do like Erase Me as something different. I think they do that sound pretty well, and I think it's pretty good. I think there's some good songs on there, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're not here to talk about Under Oath. If you want to hear us talk about Under Oath, we did it for about 2 hours on the last episode with Garrett. So go check that out. Today, we're here to talk about We Came as Romans. And for this episode, we're going to have Kyle, in his triumphant return, lead the discussion. So he will reveal his list. And as he does, Jeff and I will reveal where that album landed on our list. We'll just have a discussion. So Kyle, no more housekeeping. We got, 6 albums here today. What is the worst Under Oath out? Under Oath. Cut that. No.
Erase Me.
No.
And it's not close.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
All right. Let's do a mulligan. We got 6 albums from We Came as Romans specifically. that we're going to talk about. So, Kyle, without further ado, what is your least favorite We Came as Romans album?
Gentlemen, good to be back. Good to be back in the driver's seat. Of course, my least favorite We Came as Romans album goes by the same name as the band. Their self-titled is my least favorite We Came as Romans album.
Boys.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, I mean,
boys.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
Is this going to be the one, guys?
It could be.
Maybe.
It very well could be. I feel
we haven't had just one of two of us have the exact same list. So all three.
And I feel like this happens often where we get the first one and we're like, guys, are we going to do it? And then 2 albums later, it's like your number 4 is my number 1 or something like that. So we'll just have to wait and see.
I feel that we're back. I feel that we have finally level set and we see things. We see things identically.
I have a good feeling, but not listening to this album. Kyle, why is it so bad?
I there are quite a few tracks on here that are legitimately terrible songs. Savior of the Week. That song is bafflingly bad, not only from a song structure, instrumental, and songwriting perspective. I guess the lyrics in there are wild. What does it mean? I don't understand. What does it mean to be the savior of the weak, and why just the weak?
I think it's a play on words. So they say savior of the weak, but also savior of the weak, WEAK. And I think what they're trying to say is like people are looking for the savior of the week, and people, but every week it changes. So it's like, okay, who's going to be your savior of the week this week? Kind of. That's what at least that's what I get out of this song.
Why not have the song just be WEAK? Like that makes way more sense. Because I agree, Jeff. I picked up the double meaning, but if it was titled WEAK, honestly, it would make more sense. And if on every single lyric sheet out there it was WEAK, it would make more sense. But
look, that's the best I got.
Well, I think that misses the whole point of, the whole idea is like, what is it going to be this week? What's going to be the one, breathe the air in your lungs. Like, what's it going to be this week? The whole point is that it changes from week to week. We're all chasing those temporary things to try to fill the void or whatever it is, but none of them last is, I think, the main point of the song. Regardless, not a very good song.
No, it's terrible.
I think it's a strong contender for the worst We Came as Romans song. And I don't know what else really even comes close. But to me, I mean, it literally sounds like they're doing kind of a boy band thing on this song. Like I could totally see them doing like a synchronized bye bye bye-esque dance to the chorus of this song. Like I can see it in my head, and I just don't think that sound works very well for them, unfortunately.
No, and this album doesn't work well for them. This pivot in their sound just does not work.
Well, it's funny because it's like it's a giant wart in the middle of their discography where they stay true for 5 albums, or they stay relatively true for 5 albums, and then they just have this one. And it is kind of funny that they made this. They were like, oh, that sucked, and then they went right back to where they came from.
That is what they did. Now
they're doing much better.
Now, to give this album its flowers, though, I think the opening track is pretty good. And I think it's the one highlight that I have from this album. It actually made me pretty excited to listen to it for the first time when I heard it.
Oof.
I did. I was like, okay, this is pretty good. This is a bouncy riff with screaming, pretty serviceable chorus. Honestly, one of their better songs. I don't think it would end up on my top 25, but it's certainly pretty good and probably in the top half of their discography. Then after that, it just all falls apart.
I agree that it's a strong opening track. I think that the highlight of this album and the only song that I would think about coming back to would be Flatline.
Yes.
I think,
Yeah.
That song is a bright light in darkness.
Like that song.
How?
No,
it's
I completely
so gritty.
agree.
It's so bouncy. The strings are perfect. They're dialed in that song. It's the one song in this album that I'll come back to.
I was ready to get up on my podium and really defend that song because I thought I was going to be the only one that really liked it. But I think that song is kind of an underrated gem in their discography. Like, I really like the piano that comes in and gives it like a hint of that dramatic edge that they used to really have. It's got a really strong chorus. Like, I think it's an all around solid track that really kind of does that radio metalcore, octane core, whatever you want to call it, does that sound pretty well. And I think it's one of the best examples of that style. Really, both of those songs are the two songs that I like on here, Regenerate and Flatline. The thing about Regenerate, though, is like, and this is kind of a problem with the whole album. Yeah, it's a solid metalcore song, but it, like any metalcore band could have written that song. Like, there's nothing distinctly We Came as Romans about it, which, I mean, the albums that came before this are all so ingrained in this very unique We Came as Romans identity. Like, there's so many unique elements to their sound, and that's just not on this album. And I think Regenerate, while it is a solid metalcore song, generic and kind of lacks a lot of the flavor that makes We Came as Romans really special. And I think that's what makes this album so upsetting to me, is that it just lacks everything that made them awesome. Like, there's very little orchestral elements on here. Yeah. There's none of those crazy riffs or breakdowns that they had in that style, that specific style that they had. Yeah. And so there's just nothing to write home about on this album, which I think is really the thing that sets it apart from everything else, because most of their other albums have that, like a great element to it. But this is just not, it doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. This could have been written by any band at any point, because there's nothing unique about this. Even the choruses, I feel like I've heard from other bands before, like Tear It Down, for example. Like, what are they doing on those verses on that song?
Yeah.
Like, trying to do something like Linkin Park-esque, I guess. I have no idea.
Yeah, it is super Linkin Park.
Nothing works on that song. Memories is my guilty pleasure song on this album. I know you guys like Flatline. I think, to me, Savior of the Week, I just like blacked out after that, and like Flatline just didn't register in my head. But Memories is my guilty pleasure song. I think that song brings a pretty good emotional punch, catchy. I don't hate it, I don't love it, but I kind of like it, I guess.
I don't agree. I think Memories is just The World I Used to Know Part 2, and both songs I seriously dislike. So,
which is just We Will Pray Part 2 and Part 2 and 3.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. And that's the thing, is they all kind of run together in this kind of veil of mediocrity. Like, there's nothing that really distinguishes song to song even.
I also feel like we see this again in Defiance to 12:30, the closing track. Those just feel like the same song. And it drives me nuts, because, like we've talked about, it's just generic guitar part, generic vocals, generic melody. Give me something, guys.
At least 12:30 tries.
I disagree.
I didn't even
12:30 tries. I mean, it has.
I didn't even have a note for that song. It's like,
it has a breakdown in it. It has screams. It has screams and a breakdown, which is more to say.
So does a lot of this album, though.
Okay, well, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
just mediocre.
Yeah, well, that I agree with. I think the one thing that's pretty good on here is the vocal performances from both Kyle and Dave. Both pretty good. Kind of the only thing We Came as Romans about this album is, I recognize those vocals for sure. And, they do a decent job with some of the hooks. The heavy parts are fine vocally. Like, vocal performance-wise, they deliver.
I agree.
It's just everything around that, the music, the instrumentation, the song structure, none of that really comes together in an interesting way.
Literally everything else.
Yeah, outside of Regenerate and Flatline. Unfortunately, just not a great album. No. And I remember when it came out, a lot of people were pretty upset that We Came as Romans had gone down the path, the octane radio metalcore path that so many bands have fallen prey to. Even by this point in 2015 or whatever it was, like, this had already happened to other bands like them. And it was a shame to see it also get them.
Unsurprisingly, it does not stand the test of time. Like,
no. No.
There's no point in going back to this album. There really isn't.
Because they do like the more, I guess, accessible metalcore better on other albums.
Way better.
But we'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. This album is just kind of an unfortunate footnote in the discography of We Came as Romans.
I think that's all that needs to be said about that one.
Yeah, I think so.
I agree. Gentlemen, get your stones ready because I believe that this is where we dive. This is where our paths will separate.
Okay.
My number 5 is We Came as Robin's sophomore album, Understanding What We've Grown to Be.
What?
Whoa. Yeah, no, that's not okay.
That's such a bad take.
No,
That is heinous.
no way. That is despicable.
You're talking about like one of the quintessential We Came as Romans album. like
yeah.
made them famous.
That's so funny. Kyle, dude, I gotta hear what you're thinking here.
You think you're the right album?
I hate the production in this album so much. He sounds like he is singing in an empty hallway the entire album. It sounds bogged down. You lose the screams and the vocals in a lot of the mixes, and I don't feel like the guitars are as strong in this album as they are a little later on. And honestly, before this album. Now, my biggest gripe, I'm going back to it, is the vocal production. I will say there are some enormous hits on this record. Misunderstanding, potentially their best opening track.
Oh, yeah.
That track is unbelievable. What I Wish I Never Had. Not bad song at all. Very, very solid song. A War Inside. A War Inside is a great song, but it's one of the biggest, sounds like he's singing in an empty room with no furniture and bad acoustics. And then obviously like The Views That Never Cease. Great song. Everything else after that, I do feel like falls prey to production errors. And again, I think they did them dirty with the cleans, with the mixes on the cleans. I don't think the heavy parts hit quite as hard as they do later. I think this is a very good album. I think it's a great album. I think it's a good album. But yeah, that's my main gripe is I have trouble listening to songs time and time again where the cleans are that poorly produced.
I am blown away actually by this.
I am genuinely flabbergasted.
I was going to praise the production on this album for being so crisp and clean.
What?
Jeff, I'm right there with you. I think the production on here is great.
Especially compared to the first album. I don't know where you're getting the production problems. This album is crisp. It sounds good. The channels are very distinct. The vocals don't get lost in the instrumentation like they do in the album that comes after this, at least in my opinion. The songs on here are excellent. This is some of their best choruses, their biggest breakdowns. Every song on here is worth a listen, in my opinion.
Yes.
This is a great album.
There is a We Came as Romans album that has production issues, but it is not this one. It is not this one. Like this, I think the production on here is awesome. It's very, like of the times, I think, but like some of these breakdowns in here hit so hard and like everything there's a lot going on this album. You have the guitars, the drums, that standard metalcore band. You have 2 vocalists in Kyle and Dave who both sound excellent. And then you also have all the kind of cinematic, theatrical, orchestral elements kind of going on in the background. And it's a balancing act of all 3 of those elements. And it all sounds so well the way they weave in and out and just come together in such an amazing way. God, this album is so good. I am genuinely shocked and very concerned for where this list now may be going.
I think that the orchestral elements and the atmosphere in multiple other albums are better than this. I really don't understand how you guys.
I think they only have 2 albums where they do it really well.
2.5.
I was about to say
I don't know where the half is.
There are elements in I feel like all of them, but I feel like they're much better in 2 more after this.
Interesting. This is insane. I don't know.
I don't understand how you guys didn't like the cleans on this album are not that good. Like they are so much better in the albums after, and that's what initially made me put this so low is because I don't enjoy really many of the cleanest parts because of how they're produced. And again, it sounds like he's shouting in a giant open space with, I just feel like it's kind of drowned out and not as crisp at all.
Interesting. Now, Kyle, I will say a lot of people are not going to like that take because you're coming after the late Kyle Pavone, who was unfortunately no longer with the band.
Oh, I'm well aware. I'm well aware. And he was with the band until what, 2018 when he passed?
He passed after Cold Like War.
Yeah, see, I'm sorry. We've got 5 albums to praise Kyle. This, respectfully,
This is not one of them.
I'm just saying the production is not my cup of tea.
Sure.
Again, this is a good album. The songs on this album are very good. I've given it its praise. I did not enjoy listening to many of these choruses.
Sure. You know, to kind of loop it back around to something we touched on earlier, to me, early We Came In's Romans had such a refined, established sound that was unique to them, like from the jump. And this album is very similar to the one that came before it. There's no major improvements in terms of what they're doing, but also that's not really a diss because they had it from the start. Like they were cooking from the debut on. And so I think that's more of a credit to this band in their youth. Yeah, it's just more or less more tracks in the same style, but I think they have some of their best songs on here. Yeah. You said
I agree.
Misunderstanding.
I agree.
Misunderstanding is a heater, and I think it's one of the best We Came As Romans songs. Like, and it has such good breakdowns, and they do this technique often that I just love the sound of. And I think people did it a lot back then, but it's like they kind of play full time with this very punchy staccato rhythm. And then they drop the drums into a halftime and the guitars kind of play the same rhythm, but like with super dissonant chords, and they let them ring out instead of having them hit punchy. And like, dude, that's so good every time. That never gets old to me. Also, you know, bonus points if you bring it back into the full time after that. And I think they do it in that song. And it's just like, oh, it's so cool. Every single time they do that early on in the discography. You also mentioned What I Wish I Never Had. I love the darker sound and the heavier moments of that one. And the way that contrasts with the chorus is just so cool. And I also really like in the back half of this album, there's the 1-2 punch of Stay Inspired and Just Keep Breathing, which like is peak hopecore. I don't know what else to call it. Like that is like as quintessential hopecore as it gets. And I think those are kind of two of the more well-rounded songs between the heavy fun moments and how great the melodic parts are. And so I look at this track list and it's like banger after banger after banger, and they have these high peaks, and I just don't know how it could be so low on your list.
Yeah, there's some way worse We Came As Romans albums than this one, for sure. Nathan, just going to continue what you said, I'll just bounce off of you a little bit. There are so many cool moments on this album, whether it's them going back to the orchestral symphonic elements that we were talking about earlier, or mixing in these electronic, beats in some of these songs that I think really, really work well. One example is Cast the First Stone, where I think that they do that really, really well. The reason why I don't have this album at number 1, and I'll just say that my one problem with this album is that sometimes I feel like the songs are a bit formulaic and a bit repetitive compared to my number 1 album, where I felt like every song was unique the entire way through. I felt like in my number 1, they have a lot more unique elements in each song, and there's not so many repetitions compared to this one, where I feel like sometimes the songs lose a bit of their uniqueness and kind of start to sound the same, especially middle end of the album. And that's my only critique. That's my only critique. In terms of how this album sounds, I think it's really great. And I still don't really get the clean critique, Kyle, like with the cleans. I didn't hear that. I think the cleans sound good. This album sounds very, very polished, and I'll give you that. If you preferred the To Plant a Seed sound, this album does deviate from that a little bit, I think. But I think it's for the better. So that's where I'm at with this album.
That's fair. That's fair. I think this album, obviously you guys disagree, is bloated. I think there are songs that you could certainly remove, but
I think maybe.
I think it's a great album. I think it's a great record. Don't get me wrong, folks. However,
there are a couple of songs I could remove from here.
Like what? Give me one.
The Way That We Have Been. I'd be fine to let that one go.
Definitely agree with that.
Views That Never Cease, maybe.
Disagree. Okay. I like that song. I think that's a good song. I would get rid of Stay Inspired, but it's just me.
I like that one.
Yeah, I think that one would have to go as well for me too.
I think that's just such a good, like, more approachable track, I guess. Like, everything about the hook is so big and catchy, and it's kind of got a great balance between the heavier and melodic moments. Like, it feels very cohesive. And it definitely plays to that hopecore crowd that this band had. It's an iconic song, I would say, for them.
Yeah, that's fair. Just Keep Breathing too, Nathan, like you mentioned.
So good.
I just feel like that song runs into a little bit of that repetitiveness that I was talking about. With like they say, just keep calm, everything is hard, over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
But that's like my one critique of that song.
It is kind of interesting to have that immediately following Stay Inspired. Like those back to back feel very similar. They feel like similarly paced songs. And so I think there are maybe some pacing issues that I have with this album. But I mean, if I'm just looking at these songs, they're bangers. Like there's some bangers on here. A War Inside, Kyle, you also mentioned earlier. I love
Great song.
Their approach in that one with the more kind of drawn out, very romantic strings as opposed to kind of like the plucky. I feel like most of the songs they have kind of the plucky strings, but in that one they're very long and sweeping, and it's super cool.
This song feels like a real testimonial, very emotional. And it's cool that they can pull that off in this album where some songs are so crushing. And then they bring in like these emotional punches.
Well, even the back half of that song, like the breakdown in that song hits hard following kind of the more melodic first half. And so like, yeah, no, it's awesome the way they balance that.
Yeah. That's what puts early We Came as Romans separate from so many other bands, is that their use of these orchestral elements to bring in the emotional testimonies of some of the lyrics, because they're talking about pretty deep stuff, I think sets them apart from a lot of other bands. And it's sad that they lose that identity later on in their discography, but we'll talk about that more as we get to future albums.
To what you're saying about it being like kind of formulaic at times, I think it's hard because, you know, it's not very formulaic in terms of metalcore, but it definitely becomes kind of formulaic, like the We Came as Romans formula. It kind of starts to show itself at times on this album. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is definitely a We Came as Romans song. Not one of my favorites necessarily. It's not bad, but it is, you know, there are other versions of this song that are better.
Exactly. I felt like near the end of this album, I started to get to the point where I was like, you know, I kind of heard this before. Like, I want something to come out and just like really surprise me and really push the boundary of what I've heard. And I felt like, to Kyle's point, maybe this album has one too many songs. I think it is one of their longer albums without the deluxe.
Oh, especially if you're looking at the deluxe.
Yes. Without the deluxe, though, it's still, I think, one of their longer albums. So I feel like maybe removing a couple maybe would have improved the listening experience in general of this album. I hate to put that on the album because the songs themselves are good. Yeah. It's just when listening to the album in its entirety, it does start to get a little tiring.
Yeah. And I think that probably indicates it's a bit of a pacing issue.
I agree.
But yeah, that's really my biggest nitpick is probably the pacing on this album. Outside of that, I mean, I've said it again and again. I think these songs are great. So with that, I'm gonna stop yapping on this one because I'm gonna start repeating myself.
All right, Kyle. Anything else? Or are you ready to move on?
I got nothing else. This is going exactly as planned. And this number 4 slot,
I'm scared.
I am also scared because I don't exactly.
Oh no.
The 3 and 4 spot for me, honestly, the 2 through 4 spot have been really hard to rank. I enjoy these 3 albums a whole lot. And so I am struggling. I have to go with my heart.
Oh no.
Darkbloom.
Oh, yeah. Jeffrey, come on.
That was between 3 and 4 for me for a while.
Me too.
And so I
was between my 4 and 5 here for a little while.
I don't know. I never really had any problem putting this list together. I feel pretty confident from my first listen through about what my list was going to be, and it never deviated.
That's fair. Well, I'm glad that we are on a similar ground now, gentlemen.
Yeah, we're back.
We are so back potentially. Nathan and Jeff, you guys have it at 5. I have it at 4. Jeff, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on this record?
Oh man, I was so excited to listen to this because, spoiler, Cold Like War is not a bad album to me. And so coming up and listening, I was like, okay, where do they go from there? Because it kind of felt like they're starting to find their footing again. And so I was excited to listen to this, especially after the opening track, Darkbloom, which I actually think is not bad.
Good song.
And again, it was one of those tracks that, okay, I was like, I can get into this. Like, maybe not my most favorite opening track of We Came as Romans, but certainly pretty good. It was heavy. It has a good breakdown. I was into it.
Yeah,
but then you get the Plague.
Keep going.
And then you get the Plague. And this album does something repeatedly that I absolutely hate about a lot of modern metalcore bands, which is they start with this sick, frenzied riff. You're like, this song is going to rock my socks off. And then it just dies. They cut the riff and it goes into the slow, melodic, clean portion. And then from the momentum of the song is completely dead. And they do this over and over and over again on all of these songs. Plagued and The Anchor are the two biggest culprits of that formula that they love to do. Start with this crazy high momentum riff and then just kill it for cleans. I hate that so much.
That's the modern metalcore formula, baby. Come on.
It just feels like wasted potential to me.
I actually disagree with you quite a bit. Like, I don't hate that. I enjoy a build to a huge chorus, and then the huge chorus drops off into that filthy riff again, like in Plagued.
That doesn't happen.
And then and that does. The chorus
I don't feel like it
off.
happens.
The chorus is huge, and then goes back into the Plagued part, where it's just 800 guitars on top of each other, chugging, and they scream Plagued. Like, that happens.
Yeah.
Right after the chorus. Sure. I love that.
Okay, to me, it feels like lost momentum. I know you like it, but it feels like kind of an unearned, like they're trying to do two things at once. The people who like the aggressive music will make them happy, and the people that like the clean music will make them happy too. And I feel like you can't really please both doing this formula, at least for me. Because when I hear the Plagued riff and the sick intro where they're screaming Plagued, I want that energy to carry out throughout the entire song. I want a chorus that has that riff behind it and is like a quick, fast chorus, catchy. And it just doesn't do that. So that's my biggest gripe with this album. Secondly, though, Daggers. What is going on in that song?
Yeah.
I would like to know. Who is 0936? Apparently, he's a guy. He has over 1 million listeners on Spotify. But he's
a guy who wants to be Eminem very badly.
Yeah.
That's the guy who dressed up as Eminem 8 years in a row for Halloween, and it got weird. Respectfully.
I just that rap portion in that song just kills the entire thing for me, because otherwise Daggers is okay.
Yeah,
it's an okay song, but the rapping is just so bad. I just can't. It takes me out of my metalcore listening so bad. And then the rest of the songs, to me, feel like a continuation, unfortunately, of the We Came as Romans self-titled album. A lot of clean, focused ballads over pianos, or maybe over some soft guitar, and it just doesn't work for me. Promise You is a good closer. It's very emotional, pretty catchy, but it's not enough to bring this album out of the number 5 spot on my list. And so that's what I have to say about this album.
I slightly disagree with you on the ballads. I agree in that there are more than one. But I do enjoy One More Day, and I think that one's actually kind of impactful because it's obviously about Kyle. Yeah, Jeff, you feel bad now, but it obviously,
because Promise You is that, and Promise You is way better.
Oh, I disagree with that completely. I think that One More Day is far better than Promise You.
I think Promise You is really great, and I think it's a fantastic closing track for this album, especially when you realize, like, oh, it's a direct follow-up to Promise Me, the closer on Cold Like War, where that's like a very, Kyle driven song. And he's singing about like being afraid of being forgotten. And then the last line of this song, obviously, where Dave's taken over the cleans now, where he's talking about like, I will never stop saying your name, like putting the fear of being forgotten like to rest. Like that lyrical connection there between these two songs makes it such an impactful closer. And I think that's kind of how I feel about the back half of this album, especially, is like the ballads have such impactful lyrics that it really works on a level that a lot of other metalcore ballads really don't. Because obviously this is, the first and only record so far without Kyle Pavone on it. And to me, like, honestly, for losing what's such an integral part of their sound, that recognizable voice that Kyle had, it's like, man, yeah, that's obviously missing here, but I think they do a pretty good job of moving forward. Like, obviously, Kyle's passing, terrible tragedy, wouldn't wish something like that on any band. But it's clear they're trying to move forward as a group here, and I think they do a pretty good job. I think the songs that stick with me the most are those ballads that are so vulnerable in their lyricism and so impactful with what they're singing about. I mean, it really kind of does elevate this album to a level that it wouldn't otherwise be on if it wasn't so vulnerable, because a lot of this. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to your point, Nathan, I think it peels back the veil of his addiction and what he was going through, especially with One More Day, where the whole point is like, had you just told us that you were not good and that you were sinking deeper and deeper into this thing, you might still be here. The anchor, similar messaging is of, I can't seem to move on, but you were the anchor. But he was the one that was sinking. It is interesting. I like that you brought that up, Nathan. Just the vulnerability in a genre with so much angst and I don't know, machismo. I don't know. I agree with that. That's a good point.
Yeah, no, I think it does elevate what is otherwise, and like, I don't want to rip on this album too hard because obviously it's very personal to them, but like that element of the vulnerable lyricism does kind of elevate what is really otherwise kind of a generic modern metalcore album. Like, instrumentally, to me, this just does not really do anything for me on these songs, especially the heavy ones. And Jeff, you were kind of keying into that like modern metalcore template where it's big riff, low verse, big chorus, into the big riff again. And that formula just doesn't really do anything for me. And I think, that style of breakdown, even where it's just, oh, it's heavy because it's low tuned, but there's no like crazy rhythm or anything on top of it that really elevates it into something else, especially by the time they play it the third time in the song. I'm kind of like, okay, cool. But just that style of breakdown where it's like pre-vocal breakdown line, ba-ba, 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 that doesn't do anything for me. And I think Double Speak's probably the worst offender of that on here, but they do it throughout this album. And that's just where the genre is at right now. And I think, part of the issue is at this point, I've heard so much metalcore that I just need something a little more for me to really be interested in a song.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think if I was new to the genre, new to this band, and I heard this album, I'd be like, oh, this is great. This is a genre that's really cool. It's really speaking to me. They do a great job. It has a balance of heavy and really vulnerable moments. Like, awesome. But for me, this style just doesn't really do anything for me. It's very in one ear and out the other. Outside of Darkbloom, which I think is an excellent song, easily the most engaging one on here, with how heavy it gets, how catchy the song is. And it still has those generic moments, like the robot voice drop at the start that says the song name. But outside of that,
I kind of like that though.
I like that. People hating on that can suck one. I love it when that happens.
Look, I wasn't saying it was good or bad. I was just saying it's a generic thing that happens in this song. Like that's all over metalcore right now, or at least a couple of years ago. But outside of that, I think the electronics really do a really good job of adding depth to this song and adding atmosphere. And there's so many little things, like especially in the chorus, it just sounds so cool. And I think Darkbloom is a really standout track on what is otherwise kind of an okay album. But even then, it's not the best version of that song. The version they did with the Brand of Sacrifice, where they redid the entire.
I really like that song,
dude. It's awesome. They reimagined the whole song and made it heavier, which is so cool. Because usually when a band reimagines a popular song, they do like a ballad approach, but they're like, nah, Brand of Sacrifice, come in here and make it heavier. And they did, and it is awesome. I love that version of the song, and it's probably my go-to version of the song now. But yeah, that's kind of besides the point, since we're not talking about Brand of Sacrifice right now. But that version is amazing.
It's really good. One last thing I want to say about this album. We Came as Romans has proved in the past that they can do emotionally charged songs while sticking to a traditional metalcore sound. So I understand that this album is emotional and that these ballads mean a lot to them. I still don't think that's a good enough defense for why these songs, they're just so formulaic and kind of boring. And I mean, We Came as Romans has proved in the past that if they want to do emotional, they can do it while still screaming with breakdowns. They can. They've done it before. So I just wonder, for this album, I wish they would have gone and done that more instead of continuing to go into this, what sounds like to me a very generic, Nathan, like you said, brand of metal. That's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, for sure. I'm right there with you. The style's fine. It's not for me, I think, is why this album ranks so low. But the vulnerability is a nice touch, and I think it does elevate it beyond just, a generic metalcore album. I think the lyrical content does elevate it quite a bit. Jeff, we're looking good so far.
I'm excited about this. I think there's a good chance that we could have something here.
This might be a special day. This legit for you guys, of course, but still might be a special day. And I hope we can continue it right now as my third and just a disclaimer. I know I said this was number 4. My top 3, I genuinely love. I love all 3 of these albums. So just bear that in mind. All right, folks, don't make me hurt. My number 3, We Came as Romans album is Tracing Back Roots.
No.
You can't move it down one? Does it have to stay there?
I can't. It's staying right there.
Oh,
what a
man.
shame.
I have it at number 3. Nathan has it at number 3. Jeff has it at number 4. And honestly, Jeff, if we could trade spots right now, I would trade spots with you. Just devastating. Truly devastating.
That is really
a white whale. We're never gonna get it. No matter how much
true, dude. Yeah, we have to do a band with like 3 albums.
Honestly,
and even then, I'm
not so sure.
I'm not certain. Nathan, give us your thoughts. Why is Tracing Back Roots your number 3 favorite We Came as Romans album?
Yeah, I guess one thing that strikes me about especially the first 3 albums that We Came as Romans put out is like just how perfect of an example they are of the hopecore era of the early 2010s. Obviously, We Came as Romans, kind of the poster children for that subgenre. And look, I know different people have different thoughts on hopecore. Some people just think it's corny and cringe and the whole subgenre was a waste. And sure, it is pretty corny at times. But for me, it works. And I would certainly take a corny hopecore moment over a Misfit anthem any day of the week. Because a corny hopecore moment can make me roll my eyes for sure. But a corny Misfit anthem will make my skin crawl. And that's just, I guess, a little aside. But this album, I think, is the most hopecore We Came as Romans album with some of the more melodic approaches to these songs. Obviously, you can get to a wider audience, but just some of the lyrical content on here, it does maybe venture into some of the corny hopecore lyricism from time to time. But I think they do it well, man. This is their sound and they do it well. Yeah, I don't think it's quite as compelling as the albums that came before it, but it still has a lot of what made We Came as Romans special. I think the biggest thing that's missing on here is there are a lot less orchestral elements, a lot less strings.
Yeah.
And while present in some songs, when we look at the whole album, it does feel like they've kind of dialed it down. And the result, I think it does lose a little bit of that We Came as Romans factor. But overall, I mean, this is still way more We Came as Romans to me than certainly their self-titled. But man, there are some all-timers on here. Ghosts is excellent. That is one of my favorite We Came as Romans songs because it has kind of those orchestral elements in it. And that atmosphere, I mean, just elevates the song for me. Like, that's one of the things I love most about this band. And it's also just heavy. Like they let that first heavy verse eat before bringing in the chorus. Like I just love that the song structure there. It's not just the verse, chorus, breakdown, chorus. It's, this verse and it's kind of got like this subsection and maybe a breakdown and then it goes into the chorus. It's like, I don't know. It's just so good.
I like that present, future, and past is similar in that song.
Yeah.
Feels nasty, and I don't know the name for it or the production for it, but there's like a haunting element that they implemented throughout present, future, and past. That's so cool. That makes that song a must listen, and it easily is in the top 10 of my favorite We Came as Romans songs because of the song structure. It's a different song structure than the others in that there's no real chorus throughout. It's just kind of kind of a blast straight through.
It kind of goes.
it goes and it goes fast. They kind of have that chorus cleans part at the end, but I think that's I had that note for Ghosts as well that you just said, Nathan. Just the song structures on this album are really, really interesting compared to what you usually see in the genre.
Yeah.
I also love Tracing Back Roots. I think that the opening track and the title track is fantastic.
Yep. Oh, for sure. No, it's great.
We Came as Romans always has good openers. I'll just say that much.
Oh yeah. They kick down that door pretty much on every album.
Yeah. True.
But like I said, it's a little more melodic. I Survive, a good song. It's very hopecore. That's the one that I hear some of the lyricism and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I really don't like that song.
I don't hate the song. Hearing it again took me way back because this was one of those songs that I used to really love and was in my library for a while as I was getting into heavier music. Got a catchy chorus. Also, the Aaron Gillespie feature is kind of hilarious considering we just covered Under Oath on the last episode. But yeah, I think the song is solid. It's nothing really to write home about. It has kind of a Linkin Park feel to the chorus.
You know what I was reminded of listening to this album is a lot of the Devil Wears Prada, some of their earlier stuff.
Yeah, I could see that. I think I see that more in the two albums that came before this, but I could see it, especially with the orchestral elements. Like it just yeah.
That's kind of what I meant. Is their first three records? It's just so obviously the time period when you listen to Devil Wears Prada, and then this stuff, and then even what Emarosa's first record was really similar to this sound as well.
Dude, that era of like the early 2010s and just before that, where everything had like orchestral elements were like the thing in heavy music.
Yeah, it's so fire.
It's so good though. We need to bring it back.
I kind of miss that, dude.
Bring it back.
The Gloom in the Corner does it.
Yes, Jeff. That's right where I was going.
Okay, yeah. One of the reasons why I think we like them so much is that they're willing to do that.
Well, it's like a core element of their sound.
They just make it theatric.
Yeah. Oh, and I love that. I do miss that version of metalcore a little bit. I can't lie.
No, me too. Me too. This album to me felt like a roller coaster ride in terms of quality. Tracing Back Roots I thought is really good. Then Fade Away and I Survive, I don't like that much, to be honest, at all.
That surprises me zero.
Yeah, I disagree with I Survive. I think I Survive is nice.
Well, yeah. For me, they just don't do it for me. And then Ghosts and Present, Future, and Past, I think those are good songs. And Never Let Me Go, Hope, I don't like those songs much. But then Tell Me Now, I like. It's a good song. And then A Moment, I Am Free, I don't like. And then Through the Darkest Night and Brightest Bright, I actually pretty like that. I like that song.
Yeah, no, that song is crazy.
Probably the second best song on the album.
Yeah, maybe.
So for me, I felt like I was going up and down in terms of quality. There's some great songs that I really liked, especially coming out of listening to their first two albums, which are albums I really enjoy. Coming to this, I just felt like, I kept going, well, that was a great song. I wonder what the next one will bring. And then, that was really repetitively preachy and had a weird like EDM techno beat behind it. I don't know what I just listened to. And then I would go to the next song and I'm like, wait, that riff is pretty cool. That guitar is really punchy. And there are some great screaming elements to this, like in Ghosts. I like this. And then Present, Future, and Past, excellent song. Easily one of their best songs. That song is so cool. But then Never Let Me Go with the slow cleans again. Yes, it's catchy, but felt really repetitive to me.
I was about to say that, Jeff, just to your point of that's where it's the most notable in the album, I think. From Present, Future, and Past to Never Let Me Go. It's such a stark contrast and honestly such a letdown. I agree. It kind of drops off a cliff and Never Let Me Go and Hope.
In previous bands, we've talked about this concept of whiplash, and I feel like this album has a lot of whiplash.
Sure.
Where I kept going like, wait, what am I listening to now? Wait, what am I listening to now? It almost felt like at some points I was listening to a band that didn't know what direction to go. So I feel like this album has really high highs. It also has really low lows, and that's why it ends up kind of lower on my list.
What do y'all think of the closing track, Through the Darkest Dark and the Brightest Bright? Because that's an interesting track.
It has a lot of woes.
It does have some gang woes, which upsets me to no end. But I love the implementation of metalcore, orchestra, electro, good production. Yep. It's just a really cool song, and I think it's their strongest closer.
That one really brings in like kind of all of the elements they play with, because like it has that crazy synth in the second verse. It also has like the orchestral elements throughout it, and it's just a great song. So I think it's kind of the what's that point where water or H2O exists in all three forms?
Oh, it's like the triple point?
Yeah. It's the
Schrodinger's cat.
Well, I wouldn't say it's Schrodinger's We Came as Romans, but it's like the triple point. It's the We Came as Romans triple point.
What would Schrodinger's We Came as Romans be? Every band in an iPod is simultaneously We Came as Romans, and not until you start listening.
No, I think We Came as Romans. Schrodinger's We Came as Romans is this song going to stay heavy, or is it going to fade into a melodic section to end the song?
Yes, and it is simultaneously both.
And the only way you'll know is to listen.
It is simultaneously heavy and melodic.
You need to patent that. That's perfect. That's exactly what it is. It's like, is this song going to be? I need to know. Is this song heavy, or is it going to be cleans heavy? Well, we won't know until after that initial riff, where they try to trick you.
We have to open the box to find out. And unfortunately, once you do that, it's one or the other.
That is so good.
Yeah, that's so exactly. Good. That's how I felt listening to Darkbloom, like truly.
Yeah.
Schrodinger's We Came as Roman. It's so stupid. All right. The last thing I'll say about We Came as, or about this album, Tracing Back Roots, the cleans are produced so much better than the album before, and that's why it takes the cake. I think the cleans and the production entirely is better than Understanding What We've Grown to Be.
That's just wrong.
I forgot to mention this, because this was the album that I was going to say has the weakest production out of all their albums.
I agree. I think the production on here just straight up sucks.
Like, it's so muddy. It doesn't sound good for some reason. To me, the vocals don't sound great. They don't sound crisp. And I feel like it gets lost in some places behind the instrumentation.
Yeah. Well, here's my take on the production on here. It's, a serious step down from the two albums that came before it. To me, everything just sounds so thin. Like, there's no real depth to the guitars or drums, which obviously kind of takes away from the impact a lot of the heavier moments could have. And to me, it doesn't necessarily sound muddy. Like, I can still kind of make out everything that's happening. It just sounds flat, which really kind of ruins the listening experience.
I don't think so.
But to me, it almost has the opposite problem. I feel like the guitars are too crunchy in a sense, where it like envelops everything else going on in the song.
They are crunchy. For sure. I just think everything sounds so thin on here. It reminds me of what's that A Day to Remember album with the bad production? It's Bad Vibrations. I think the production on that album kind of sucks, and it like the kick drum kind of sounds like they're hitting a cardboard box. Like the production on there, this reminds me of that quite a bit, actually, from a production standpoint.
Oh, but yeah, I do. Yeah.
If I recall correctly, though, Bad Vibrations had more issues other than the production.
No, it certainly did. I'm just talking about the production.
That was Nathan. That was one of your major gripes to it. So that's a good throwback.
What a poll, dude!
Throwback. Throwback to.
You're welcome.
Was that? That was year one, wasn't it?
Dude, that was literally 2 years ago.
That's so crazy. You know what else this album did that I thought was noteworthy?
What's that?
We can't let them get away with this. Hope, the song, was initially released on the deluxe version of Understanding What We've Grown to Be. And then they have the audacity to include it as an official track on this album. I feel like that can't be allowed. You cannot have a deluxe version and like have one of your songs from that just be on the next album. That's not how that works. It's one or the other.
True, and if Hope were a good song, I would feel more something about it, but it's not that good, so I don't really care.
Exactly.
I just think it's crazy to include a bonus track that you included on the previous album, or that you had on the previous album. Like, that's just like, that's crazy.
That's actually bad business practice.
It must have done pretty well for them to do that. Like, oh, they were like, oh, we can't let this die in the singles section of Spotify or hidden on the deluxe version. Like, it needs to be on an album.
It needs to be front and center. And then they realized their decision was wrong.
I don't know that they did realize that.
Again, is not that good.
How many? I'm gonna look this up right now. How many streams does that song have?
If I recall, it actually has quite a few.
I think it is kind of a big hit for them.
All right, my bad.
Which would make sense.
I was shocked.
It would make sense as to why they did that. Oh my word. Okay, so here's the deal. Oh my gosh. Most of the songs on this album, Tracing Back Roots, 5 mil. Fade Away, 8 mil. I Survived, 3 mil. Approaching 4. That kind of surprises me. Ghost, 3 mil. And you're getting some lower numbers. And then Hope has 34 million plays.
Yeah, that's what I remember. Okay, so that explains why it has such an enormous stream count compared to the other songs.
And I mean, it was the first song on the deluxe version of Understanding What We've Grown to Be, which is honestly probably the better way to do that as a band in the streaming era, especially. Like, put your deluxe songs up top so you have to listen to them first before the rest of the album. But yeah, that is crazy. I mean, that dwarfs everything on Understanding What We've Grown to Be, everything on Tracing Back Roots. That's one of their biggest songs.
I apologize.
Maybe it was good business practice.
It's obviously fantastic business practice. It's called supply and demand, boys.
But honestly, like, it's kind of a crazy thing to do. I stand by that being a crazy choice. Whoa, there are some songs with crazy streaming on Darkbloom.
No, Darkbloom is their biggest album by far.
Well, and that's because it's generic.
Whoa. Why don't you raise your voice like a man next time you offend?
That's because it's generic. It plays to the modern metalcore sound that people love right now. It's of the times.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I just thought I couldn't let that slide.
No, we should call them out on it. We should email them or something. We should let them know.
Hey, this thing you did back in like 2013 or whatever.
Really not cool.
Lame. Over a decade ago, lame.
Not Cash Money.
Schrodinger's We Came as Romans. Is this a bonus track from an old album or is this an original? You never know until you start playing it. Okay. I'm done with this album. Okay. I have nothing left.
Yeah, we got nothing left in the tank for this one.
Yep.
That was good though. That was a good segment.
That was a good segment. Back to business. My second favorite We Came as Romans album is their debut, To Plant a Seed.
Like, I get it, but
it's when I thought
not
you
right.
couldn't do anything else to offend me.
Schrodinger's Kyle. Is he going to do something good or is he going to make me irrationally upset?
We won't know until he tells us his ranking.
I figured this would be the case. You know what? I'll start at least for To Plant a Seed, as I have it at number 2. You guys have it at number 1. I think this is a pretty flawless album. It is extremely interesting that it's their debut and the song structures are as cool as they are. They implemented, or I guess not implemented, but they came in with that orchestral feel. A lot of these songs are massive. And I mean, guys, in my personal top 10, there are a handful of songs on this album. I think I Will Not Reap Destruction is their best song.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. Approved.
Yep. It's unbelievable just with the intro of the bells, the keyboards, the guitars. It's awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah, I love Intentions. I think that's an excellent song. I think the vocal layering is really interesting in his range. His range on that one stood out because again, a lot of the times you hear these singers in their first album and they're struggling to find their footing, and he knocks it out of the park immediately. Kyle did such a good job. But I mean, you even go back to their first couple of tracks or even their opening track, To Plant a Seed. You can make an argument that that's a top 10 track. I'm not sure if it'll end up in my top 10, but it is excellent. I think the production on here does have its faults, but I do think the production is excellent.
Like what?
I still have issues with the cleans, the production on the cleans, similar to their sophomore album. I just think that if they were a tad more clear and a little more crisp, I would be a bit more on board, and it might even be my number one. But there are some things that I would change, which I'm realizing now might just be my personal preference, or I'm listening to a completely different mix than you guys are. Either way, that's okay. But I do feel that this is an extremely cohesive album. I think that they immediately find their identity with their debut, which is something really cool that I don't feel like we see very often. Is we'll see bands kind of go through one, maybe two albums before they find their identity, and We Came as Romans found it immediately, which is cool to hear. And they made their stake in the genre immediately with an album that I don't know if I have really anything bad to say about it. I think there are a couple generic parts throughout, but overall, I think it's a pretty flawless record.
Yeah, no, it's great. And to your point, like they had their identity from the jump, and that's just so impressive to me. And that's one of the things that sticks out the most. And I think, honestly, part of why this may feel a little generic is I don't know if it shaped metalcore for the next few years after it came out, but this was definitely like the sound at the time. Like there were so many bands doing this hopecore, metalcore, orchestral thing that We Came as Romans was, I think personally, doing the best. I mean, you had bands like Memphis Mayfire, The Color Morale, We Came as Romans. And so it was like, this was the thing at the time. And We Came as Romans just came out guns blazing, doing it better than anyone else. And so, yeah, man, it's just so cool to see a band have that identity from the jump. And such a cool identity, too, that really set them apart. Like a lot of bands did the cinematic elements, but I think beyond that, there's also a unique style to just their instrumentation as a metalcore band, especially in the guitar riffs. Very choppy, very staccato, really wild leads that kind of break up some of the rhythmic sections. It's cool. Like they just had a unique sound. And I think they're one of the bands that if you just played me an instrumental track for like 10 seconds, I'd be able to point out that's We Came as Romans, especially if you're looking at some of the heavier sections on here. And that's really cool. I couldn't say that about every band, but I think We Came as Romans is one of those bands.
Yeah. I think that this is a immensely well executed, albeit kind of basic in today's ears, metalcore album. And I think that's kind of encapsulates what this is. The screaming and the singing to me both sound great.
Yep.
To Kyle's point, I don't feel like the production is 100% on this album. I actually think the album after this, they kind of fixed a lot of the problems. But it's really, really good, especially if this is their debut album. I mean, we've heard some debut albums where the production is horrendous. And so, props to them for doing such a good job of getting it almost completely right the first time. The breakdowns are crushing. The riffs, Nathan, to your point, are incredibly memorable. They're fast, they're punchy. And then the extra sound effects, whether, these orchestral elements like we've been mentioning, or the robotic synth elements that they add on top of it, they both come together to form a really unique listening experience. And like I was saying earlier, these songs to me I don't think repetitiveness is a big problem on a lot of these songs. The bridges are super unique, and I think the sound effects are a big portion to why that is. Like in Broken Statues, where they have the electronic robot elements and then the strings come in right after that. Or We Are the Reason with the unique chimes.
Yes.
Yeah. And
yes.
That song to me almost feels like they're like a magnum opus kind of track. It just all comes together. It's massive. It's huge. It has the string quartet accompanying the chorus. That song is just so beautifully massive. That song is great. I could say that about almost every song on this album. It's huge. It's massive. I just feel like this whole album is filled with great moments.
Yeah, I signed off on Kyle saying To Plant a Seed is their best song, but it might be We Are the Reasons.
I think it's weird.
It also might be I Will Not Reap Destruction. But like that's kind of the point, isn't it? Like, oh come on, that song is great.
Oh, wait. Sorry,
You said that song's great, Kyle.
No. I apologize.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The song that's green on my phone right now, I thought that's what you're referring to. Yeah, I Will Not Reap Destruction is the best one. But I do think that you can kind of interchange it with We Are the Reasons.
That's the thing about this album is the highs are so high. Like obviously To Plant a Seed is great. Kind of sets the stage for what the album is going to be. Like it has everything that makes them them. And it's like you hear that song and you're like, oh, this is cool. You're going to like the rest of the album. If you hear it and you're like, this isn't for me, you can pass on the rest of the album because it's kind of more of that. Intentions is great. It has that For We Are Nothing Without Brotherhood breakdown with the just full on symphonic buildup right before it that goes so hard, dude. Like it's so cool.
It has like bar drums.
Yeah, it's awesome. And like just the idea to do something like that on your debut album, like that's a kind of out there thing to just, all right, we're going to have the whole band drop out. We're going to have this full on symphonic moment that sounds like you're seeing a theatrical production. And then we're going to bring in a breakdown, carry on the strings through it. It's awesome. Dreams. We haven't talked about Dreams yet, but like I thought that was going to be more of kind of a melodic ballad track based on the intro. But then it kind of goes into some of the heaviest moments on the album with some absolutely sick breakdowns. And so like, this album, like some of the other ones we've talked about, has those interesting song structures. They're doing interesting things on here. And it's just so fresh. It's so cool. I personally don't have any problems with the production on here. I think it all sounds great. I love this album.
So my least favorite song is Searching, Seeking, Reaching Always.
Mine too.
And I think that's the one low point on the album. It's not a bad song, but it's certainly not great.
Yeah.
But so that's like, this album's not perfect.
No.
But it's pretty close.
It's not perfect, but it is iconic.
Yes.
Yeah. And also like Searching, Seeking, Reaching Always, Jeff, to your point, it is kind of buried in the album. And it's, I don't know, it didn't offend me as much as if they put that as the closing track but they did follow it up to I Will Not Reap Destruction, which did feel a little bit tough. But
my note, look at it now. My note for Searching, Seeking, Reaching Always is the instrumentation at the start of this is a bit of a mess. The hits make it sound like a Disney Channel original movie song, like we're going to Camp Rock or something. Oh my god! It just sounds like you get the muted notes, and the drum pattern that just makes it sound like you're supposed to clap along. Yeah, that song doesn't work for me. I think that's the only miss on here, though.
Yeah. If you take that song out, it could be nasty.
Could be perfect.
It's close.
I think this is one of the best debut albums we've covered on this show.
Definitely. Yeah.
Maybe Beartooth, but I think I like this more, to be quite honest. Oh, I don't know if I do. Those are both great albums. Full-length albums, that is, if you're not counting Beartooth's EP. But still hopecore. The hopecore bands had it figured out from the start. That's the pattern I'm seeing.
They really have. And speaking of Beartooth, makes an appearance on Darkbloom.
Oh, hello. Yeah, yes.
For like one line.
I did notice. I did see Caleb Shomo after a couple listens. I was like, he's on this album?
Yeah, it's like one line.
That's weird.
I was like, I don't remember hearing Caleb Shomo on this song, but okay, I'll take your word for it.
Hi, Caleb. Bye, Caleb. That's what it felt like.
It's like Caleb. Bill Murray song. It's like his feature in Thickly, where he comes in at the very end and says like, "Hi, I'm Caleb. This is my vocal feature."
Yeah, literally, exactly.
Nathan, back to your point though, I will say that the best debut that we have covered is Linkin Park Hybrid Theory, and it's not close.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
I do want to loop back to that just so we cover our bases.
Yep. I'm glad you said that because I don't want to look like an idiot. You're totally right. Hybrid Theory is one of the best albums of all time.
I've looked like an idiot enough for us this episode. We can't afford it anymore.
We can't have two of us go down.
That's true. I'm the one that graciously goes down pretty much every other episode. So I'll bear that burden again.
Yep. Hey, we appreciate it, Kyle. We appreciate your service to the pod.
Yep.
All right. Yep. Should we move on to your number one?
My number one, your number 4, Jeff's number 3. We can if you'd like. You guys were
I
giving
would
me a
love
lot
to.
of crap, Jeff. You especially. You have this in your top 3.
What? I like this album.
What album is it?
The album that I like the most, some would call it my favorite We Came as Romans record, is Cold Like War.
You're telling me right now you're scared again, and now you're losing composure. You're telling me right now you cared, but you were never honest. I don't even want to know. Take away our wasted age. Take away our wasted age.
I think this is a modern masterpiece. And Nathan, you have it at number 4. Jeff, you have it at number 3. I'll go first.
Lead off.
Well, after calling it a modern masterpiece, I think you should.
Yeah, I don't think you can just say that and then be like, "Oh, Jeff, what do you think?"
I think this album doesn't have any skips. I think almost every song is We Came as Romans at their best. I know we talked about To Plant a Seed. They came in with an identity. This isn't necessarily the same identity as To Plant a Seed, but I think they found their footing specifically in the melodies department. Every single one of their melodies on this album are really intriguing and pretty catchy. I will say Promise Me is not great, so maybe it's not a masterpiece, but every other song has a melody in it that I think the song leads up to really, really well. I understand why you guys don't like it quite as much because a lot of these songs are centered on the chorus melodies. But I think that Kyle has shown he's grown with writing choruses and writing hooks throughout, and it kind of peaks here. My favorite song on this album is Wasted Age. I think the chorus in that song is one of their best choruses, if not their best chorus. I think the bodies of every single one of these songs are really, really interesting. Their guitars are nasty. It sounds like they are all tuned to oblivion in this album, and it's interesting. It's extremely interesting. Are there gang chants and gang woes throughout? Yes. Does that kind of suck? Yes. Does that also give more credence to it not being a masterpiece? Maybe, but I love this record. I think the production is fantastic. I think when they go heavy, it's unbelievable. Specifically, the breakdowns are breakneck in this album when they come. I mean, it's so fascinating. Low point on the album is might be no, I like Encoder. I don't like the electronic state that they
I almost said Encoder is like a top 5 We Came as Romans song to me.
Whoa.
I disagree with that, but I do enjoy that they really, really leaned full into the electro on that song, and it still isn't terrible because they still built it around the We Came as Romans sound but didn't do the crazy frog thing that they did in Doublespeak in Darkbloom. You know, you guys know what I'm talking about, right?
I think so.
I hope so.
Cool. Dude, I know we did. I didn't mention it, but Doublespeak, the little crazy frog loop that they have makes me angry.
You don't like a chopped vocal sample in heavy music.
That's what it is.
No, I'm fine with that throughout. All right, forget it. The Doublespeak, like it starts with forget about it. I've been talking for a while. What are your guys' thoughts? Bring me down.
No, I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I do think that the riffs on here are great. I think this album is full of amazing moments, especially coming off their self-titled. You know, it's almost like they flipped the switch completely. Cold Like War is a great song.
Yes.
And I think coming off of, listening to that, it's like, okay, where has this We Came as Romans been the last, 2-3 years? To me, I mean, this album has a lot of the great elements of We Came as Romans that I love, but it also incorporates some of the things that I don't love as much, like Two Hands, kind of repetitive, clean focused. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. As much as I love a lot of the songs on this album, there are definitely some points where I'm like, yeah, this isn't working for me nearly as much. Like The Closer, which doesn't work for me nearly as much as other songs on this album. So to me, this is a great album with some blemishes. Now, I'll give this album its praises real quick. Vultures with Clipped Wings, great opener. Cold Like War, one of my favorite songs on the album. Wasted Age, Kyle, like you mentioned, fantastic song.
Banger.
Insanely catchy chorus that will get hooked in your head for weeks after you listen to it. And a very iconic riff, I will say, that they actually use throughout. Encoder, one of my favorite We Came as Romans song. I think that song is so heavy. So heavy. And it's really cool that they included it in this album to just be like, yeah, we could do like a insanely heavy scream focused song if we want to. And it's going to sound great. And we're also going to have like female robotic vocals saying beat, beat, beat at the beginning. And it's all going to come together and work really well. And then If There's Nothing to See, I think it's just a really, really good classic We Came as Romans song. As much as you could call it a misfit anthem. Those are my thoughts on this album. I think it's good, not great, has some blemishes, but I certainly think it's the best modern, quote unquote, We Came as Romans album.
Oh, for sure. Also, side note, is it a female vocal or is it Kyle on Encoder? I thought it was Kyle.
Oh, is it? And they just cut. It sounds high pitched to me.
His voice was pretty high. His voice was up there.
But it sounded like a sample.
It was a chopped vocal sample that like he recorded and then they chopped up for something.
Oh, really?
That doesn't really matter. But I don't know.
No,
I'm just trying to cover our bases here in case anyone comes after us. We're looking out for each other this episode.
Live fact checking. I appreciate that. No, it sounded like that to me, but to be fair, I just knew it was a sample of something.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to speak on this album, this is a great course correction following their self-titled. I think you can look on the streaming numbers. Self-titled didn't exactly land like they wanted it to. Mm-hmm. And so they looked at that and said, okay, let's do what we do well and bring back some of that heavy that actually works really well. It's not a full-on return to form where they go back to their roots, but it does feel like this album has more aggression and energy to it. It's also just a lot more interesting. Y'all have kind of talked about it already. Some of the ideas they had on here are super cool. Like, you don't get a song like Encoder on their self-titled. That just does not happen because it's not necessarily radio friendly. It's cool. It's super cool, super engaging, but it's not made for radio play. And I think that's a huge compliment. And that's easily the most out there song on here. And I think We Came as Romans kind of knew what they were doing here, considering the opening track talks about returning to form at some point in the lyricism. And so they knew. But yeah, I think this album's strong. Y'all have already talked about my favorite tracks on here. Cold Like War and Wasted Age. That's like peak modern We Came as Romans. Like, that was the first time this band really successfully moved on from their traditional sound, in my opinion. They set about the strings and theatrical elements for, more traditional modern metalcore ideas like, the electronics. But I think those songs work so well. Great choruses, great riffs, and the production is pretty cool. It's kind of a different production style than I've heard from a lot of other bands, but it's so cool and it hits so hard. And yeah, I mean, those are definitely my favorite tracks on here, but Vultures with Clipped Wings is cool. If There's Nothing to See, like, that's an enjoyable song. Both vocalists on here sound as great as ever.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, Dave kills this album. It was this album that made me realize, like, there's something about his vocal delivery and his screams that makes him really easy to understand when he's screaming. And I think that's like a big contributing factor to a lot of their success. And yeah, I mean, I think they both sound great. I'm so glad they were able to course correct on here for one last record with Kyle. And like, obviously it's super sad, but I'm glad the band was able to kind of go out with this high note in their original form, I guess.
That's what I was about to say. The stark contrast between self-titled and Cold Like War, only coming out a couple years between the two. It is a very nice send off, and I'm really glad that the self-titled is not the last that we heard of Kyle and his songwriting, because he obviously had a lot more in the tank, and I'm just really thankful that this is how it ended. Obviously, I wish it hadn't ended, but if it has to end, ending like this is good.
For sure. I feel like it would have been really easy for them to call it quits after this, and I think certainly everyone would have understood. But it is cool, even though it's not necessarily for me, it is cool to see their new album doing so well, because there are so many meaningful tracks on there about Kyle and his legacy. And so I guess that's more of a thought on their newest album. But I'm glad they were able to have one last album with him that is this good.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty low on my list, but I think that's more of a credit to how much I love their hopecore trilogy, I guess you could call it, that really kicked off their discography. But yeah, this is a really strong album, and it has two of my favorite We Came as Romans songs, and the best of their modern era by far, I think.
Yeah, and as much as I like to joke that you offended me by putting this number one, Kyle, there are a lot of people that agree with you and think that this is their best album.
Oh
and
yeah,
it's definitely good and it's great. So
And I will lose all credibility with them though when they see what my number 5 album is, which
maybe
I will bear that
Probably.
cross.
probably.
Oh man.
But yeah, this is a great album. That's all I got to say.
Cool.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, I think that about does it for this episode. Kyle, do you want to read through your rankings and then we'll get into some Patreon stuff?
absolutely. My rankings for We Came as Romans are number 6, they're self-titled We Came as Romans. Number 5, Understanding What We've Grown to Be. Number 4, Darkbloom. Number 3, Tracing Back Roots. Number 2, their debut, To Plant a Seed. My favorite We Came as Romans album is Cold Like War.
Excellent. Yeah, that is a interesting list, my friend. But before we head out of
Okay.
here, I do want to take a moment to thank all of our patrons who support this show. And we have one patron on the highest tier, which allows him the opportunity to send us his rankings where he can read them out on the show. So here is Derek's rankings for We Came as Romans.
From worst to best. Darkbloom, Tracing Back Roots, Cold Like War, self-titled, Understanding What We've Grown to Be, To Plant a Seed. To Plant a Seed and Intentions are both top 10 songs, as well as Daggers. Cheers, boys.
Well, you got the
All
first
right.
two right. That's for darn sure.
Pretty respectable list, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a solid list.
very solid.
Self-titled was a little high.
Derek is going to throw away his Patreonship after looking at my list, which is fine.
Yeah, no, that's completely allowed.
No, but his first two are exactly where they should be. And after that, it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
As long as your first two agree with Nathan and I think you're good to go.
I think so too, but I may be a little biased there. Now,
I'm super biased.
now he did say "Daggers" is a top 10 song,
I heard
and
that.
I guess you'll just have to come over to our Patreon and see what we come up with for our top 10 consensus songs to see if we agree
Yeah.
with that or not.
I heard that. I don't know. I don't think Daggers is going to end up on that list.
But we'll find
might be
out.
number 11. We'll see.
Oh
Just
man,
kidding,
thank
yeah.
you so much, Derek, for sending that in.
We appreciate
we
you.
appreciate you a lot. We appreciate all our patrons. And so, with that, our next episode is going to be Halloween. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what our patrons vote for us to cover. And with that, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a good day.